Well, I think this is the crowd we're having for tonight. If people come in, so be it, and they can join our discussion wherever we are in it. But to kick off, I think most of us know each other. Maybe some of you may not know Mason or Aaron, but they sit on the Men as Allies group. Mason actually leads that. And then I think, Aaron, are you a co-lead or a VP?
Yeah, serve on the board.
Okay, yeah. So both of them are on the committee. As we've all discussed, they're graduating this year, so they're looking to hand it off as well. But this is one of the ways that we are looking to partner with them to hold, similar events. And what better way to start the year off than to have an allyship event with them? I am the VP of allyship for Kelley WIB, and I'll hand it off to Aaron to kind of tell about himself, and then we'll get into the questions in the video that we're going to share today.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all here. So thanks for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. So my name is Aaron. I'm a second-year full-time MBA and serving on the board of the Kelley Men as Allies. Funny enough, I actually did my undergrad at Indiana years ago as well. So sort of an interesting experience, coming back as a grad student, being in Bloomington again. But I worked in consulting for a little bit out of undergrad, and then worked for a CPG startup and really sort of found my passion for the world of CPG. One of the things I liked in particular is that it tends to be, I think, a more egalitarian world than some of the other MBA jobs, which, can be pretty male dominated. And so I think it's, an interesting forum to be an ally. But you see a lot of these things that crop up when it comes to certainly the corporate world as well. So very excited to talk with you guys here tonight. Thank you all for being here. And do you want to start with the video or jump in with the questions?
Before we start with questions video, just a quick poll Michelle put together. We are looking to record some of our events. We just want to get your comfort level if you guys want this posted or not. Completely okay to say no. We just want to be mindful of how people are feeling in terms of getting this posted to a platform such as YouTube. That should pop up on your screen. And it is anonymous. It's an anonymous poll. Think, Michelle, do we have everyone?
We are waiting on two. Well, okay, I'm one person, I guess.
And I am also one person.
Okay, then we are good now. Thank you, everyone.
So I think we're definitely comfortable with it. If anyone after the event feels otherwise, definitely feel free to send us an email. We're happy to make a decision post-program if anyone does decide to change their mind, right? So with that, let's get into the video. I'm going to screen share, and if the audio goes through, let me know. And if it doesn't, just give us a little shout and I will do some troubleshooting. So let's see. Can you all see my screen? Okay. And then I have to do audio if I can. right. I think that gave a wonderful overview about very foundational allyship. So I'll pass it over to Erin to kick us off with some questions.
Yeah, so I think this, video gives us some interesting things here. We're curious to hear from anybody who's wanting to share. What are some of your personal experiences with allyship, and what have it seen that what does allyship mean to you in your work context?
I'll say for me, if I've noticed in meetings that I've attended where we'll have someone who is typically more quiet and someone who's not the first to share their opinion, when they start speaking or they're not heard, people want to kind of tag on and add on and build on that. And I'm guilty of that because I'm definitely loud and do that. So it's something I've become sensitive to, of trying to create space for the people that are more quiet and need someone to protect that boundary so that they can speak.
Interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes it's, not necessarily what you say out loud, but creating a space for others to feel comfortable to say what they want to say out loud.
And if I may, I'll be blunt with everybody on this call. Up until last fall, I really had no clue as to what allyship actually meant, if I want to be real with everybody here. In my mind, initially, I thought that allyship was simply just being a friend, just being somebody to show love and care to your fellow man, if you will, in your workplace and whatnot. But since the fall, and the more in depth I've gotten with, just things I've read, and then trying to look back on some of my experiences in various jobs and what not in my life, I have seen times where I myself have failed. Now I do have a clear view of what needs to be done more, and I need to be more than just a friend, but somebody there to actually take a stand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think actually, Mason, you brought up an interesting point that I was thinking about as I was watching the video, which is, how everything has changed so recently with time. And I think the awareness of allyship as a really material idea, and not just sort of a vague concept, has grown a lot. And I think about, 10 years ago, what the corporate world was like, and there were allies in places, but I don't think there was this appreciation or real shared understanding of what the concept of allyship was. Has anybody seen anything interesting with how that's like developed and formalized more across, their careers in some recent years?
Just the concept of allyship. Oh, sorry.
No,
I was just
fine.
clarifying the question, like the concept of allyship and like kind of the discussion in the workplace.
Yeah, exactly. And it becoming more of an active discussion in a lot of workplaces, where it's something that's talked about out loud as opposed to sort of practiced silently in certain parts of an organization.
I was talking over somebody, so I don't know who I cut off.
That's okay. I was going to say there's a lot more business resource groups around different marginalized communities that help. I think they try to be a little more inclusive to help you navigate whatever adversity you're facing. And I've gone at my previous job, I've gone to a couple other ones that I don't necessarily fit the bill, but like they were more open conversations. And I thought they were like pretty interesting, because there's things that I never face it. It's hard for me to see through your eyes. And I thought that was helpful.
I think also over the years, companies have really made a push to have an open dialogue about some of these conversations, and like allow people to be consistent in their actions. It's like, you don't get to pick and choose when you're an ally. You don't get to say, oh, this is the time that I want to be an ally, and then in this other instance, I don't want to speak up. And I think firms are very open to people speaking up and having them feel as though if I speak up, I'm not going to just be like the one person out of the 100 people in this room that see that there's something wrong with this, right? And I think that's really important as well, that it's consistent, and that you don't get to pick and choose. Like, regardless, you know, any minority group needs allyship. We just so happen to be the women business and men as allies group, right? But that's not to say that other diversity groups also need allies.
We have a mandated course. Oh, sorry. I'll use the raise hand tool from now on. It's very bad timing.
Well, I was thinking from the employee resource groups and all the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we've seen so far. Right? So it looks, for me, I have seen allies on like other different communities and very active in Hispanic and those things. But it was surprising, and that's what I joined today. And I saw the post in LinkedIn. I said, "Oh, bring them. Do you need allies?" I have seen the women in business, Kellys, but I always say maybe they don't need us here. It was just something like even wow, not only to get us awareness of okay, you need allies, but also like okay, you are being trusted with us too to be able to share this. That was an interesting side of how I saw it. Overall, I'm always thinking on building teams or on doing interviews. I know for interviews, make sure that we have diversity. That's something that I look for. That's how I consider myself.
That's actually a really interesting thought in terms of, you know, having a diverse panel for interviews and trying to push some more of those diversity initiatives within businesses. So I guess for our next question, what steps have you taken personally to promote inclusion of women or of people of diversity within your own workplace, within your own groups, whether it's school or clubs that you're in, whatever it may be?
I feel that if the organization have some already preset groups, that really helps. Like rather than raising an individual voice and making some like implementing some change in the workplace, rather than like doing it individually, if there is already some group. So I personally joined a group at my workplace, but having said that, not all the workplaces, they have these type of groups, right? So companies who are proactive in creating these, and in these places, I feel like putting your voice out there and making the leadership team or the like a lot of colleagues, your voice can be reached more easily. It's not easy, never ever, but it's more likely to get out there rather than an individual effort. So to answer your question, I personally joined a group, and we used to meet up pretty frequently. So that was really helpful, I think.
Jessie.
Thanks, Sam. I at my job am part of the Pride at community as an ally. So like I joined the board. I think I was the first kind of ally board member, and now there's actually another one. And interestingly, like I had a stint as kind of like a leadership role as part of our women at group. But like as a woman, I didn't like really feel like I had as much to give in that group, or that like I needed as much from it. And for some reason, I feel like I'm making more impact, like as like a leader in the group that like I don't identify as, but I'm an ally to. And it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. And perhaps like I should consider ways I can support other women. I think like because I don't feel like I necessarily need that much support day to day, I feel like less connected to the issues sometimes of the women in, you know, business community. Not our women in business, but like women in my business. I love our women in business community.
What you saying there, Jessie? What you saying?
I meant like women in like the work environment. Like I don't feel like I'm on a day-to-day like penalized for my identity. And perhaps that's because like I work with a lot of women. And so that might be like part of the reason I'm shielded, where there's like a much smaller ratio of LGBTQ plus employees in my workplace and there are women.
I'm going to share kind of, I guess, like a reverse experience of this. So and granted, I worked in an oil and gas, very traditional old boys club industry. And I found, and this is part of the reason I'm so passionate about women in business, is because I found it was actually a lot of the women that were more aggressive and working against me in the open. The men were ambivalent to their actions more often in the way that their treatment was, and the women were overtly aggressive. And like, as an example, I had a woman interviewing me and told me, she's like, well, you're young, you'll probably get married in a couple of years and just leave and have kids. So we can't expect to have you for more than 5 years. And I was told that. So I had a very much like, for a long time, I pulled away from wanting to work with any women. I did not enjoy my women bosses. I preferred when I had male leaders, because at least it wasn't as aggressive. So that, I don't know if that was like a great share there, but do what you will.
I think it's
Glad you-
something actually interesting that I'd love to like ask a little bit more on. I mean, like that environment, you know, do you feel like if you've been in an environment that was a higher ratio of women, that the dynamic is a little bit different? Because I've seen a couple different work environments myself with, you know, smaller or larger proportions of women, and I feel like when there's smaller proportions of women, that oftentimes what you described happens, where it tends to get sort of more competitive and the women aren't really helping each other as much. And I think that's maybe somehow a function of just having so many men in that group, you know, and not as much of a balanced gender situation there.
I would say it has started to take a turn with more information and more education on women not pitting each other against each other, saying, hey, let me help you to a seat in the table. We don't have to fight over the one seat. And I think in the past, it's very much been women fighting for the one seat at the table with the 9 other men. And so it was very combative. I have since worked on an all-female team, and I do have to say, stepping into that, just because of my previous experiences, I stepped into it very hesitantly, but I had great leadership and we were a team, and it was the best work environment I have experienced thus far. But it came from leadership, and it came from having a sense of inclusion versus a very, limited female population, and very much ran in old boy culture. And that might not be the right terms, that might be derogatory in itself to call it that, but if someone has better terminology, please correct me.
That's a very interesting take, because I think in the past it used to be like, we only have a pie. The pie can only be split so many ways, right? I think in one of my classes this week, we were talking about diversity, and we're talking about how the pie is growing. The pie is getting bigger. It's not that you're getting less of the pie. It's just that there's more pie to go around, right? Like the workforce is becoming more diverse, and people are going to want more slices of that pie, and rightfully so, because they're now a group, right? And they now need representation. So I think changing the narrative from the pie is limited to the pie is growing is difficult, but I think a lot of firms are getting there. But I would agree, like there have definitely been some teams that I've worked on where it's very cutthroat from some maybe more senior women, but I've also had the complete opposite, where I've had senior women pull me into rooms and say, you know, I want to tap you on the shoulder for this. Like, I want to open up doors for you. Like, I see a lot of my younger self in you. I want like you to like kind of step into this role so that I can like move on and like do something different. So I think it is a personal mentality, but I do think that it is changing very quickly too, mind you.
Sam, there's a little bit of reverse discrimination there, because per the Lean In video that you just showed us, the women identified with you, and that's why they wanted to help you.
I know. And that's so fascinating, because I think everyone thinks it's a boys' club. And maybe it is, but I do think that there are definitely pockets where, you know, it's a blank club, right? Like whatever group you identify with, there's always a little niche for you, right? So it's kind of like find your people, and then, but also don't forget to be an ally to those who are not within those like club parameters, and like help each other. That's a very interesting dynamic as well.
I'm interested to hear from people if, you know, seeing sort of the more formalized programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we talked a little bit, I think Eric brought up the point of seeing sometimes like an allies group out there is interesting, because you don't see that, you know, vocal presence of allies. But I'm curious, with the growth of allyship, have people seen more like formalized ally groups being formed, you know, whether that's ERGs or companies, or is this still relatively rare compared to the presence of other like ERGs and sort of more formalized DEI institutions?
We have ERGs at my company for almost everything, but like we don't have a group for allies. Like I said, I joined a group as an ally of that group, but there's not a group for allies, which is what I think I'm hearing you ask. Have you experienced that at your company in the past, Aaron?
No, not as much really. And that's why I'm sort of interested in this, you know, the context of really like Kelley Men as Allies being, you know, sort of a part in the orbit of the Kelley Women in Business, you know, and I'm wondering if that's like, is that a helpful path to try to encourage it being formalized like that? Or, you know, is it not really that meaningful, and just sort of enforcing that concept of allyship is enough?
I don't know what your group like does, because I'm so glad to know about it now, but I think like before we were planning this, I hadn't heard about it. Maybe within the Kelley Direct community, it's not as big. My instinct is to say, like, without knowing all that y'all do, that it's probably more or as useful to join the women's communities and be allies with the women than to form your own group and talk about allyship issues. Maybe there's a place for both though, right? Like a safe space where you can talk about being an ally, like just amongst yourselves. I see value in that, but I do think that there's value in actually joining the communities that exist, so you can hear from women or like fill in the blank community that you're wanting to be an ally to, of like what the issues are, actually meet them so that now they're becoming part of your network, and like serve in that manner. Opinion of one.
Actually, in our group, we have two of the ERGs. They have allies in their names, because you have to specify that you're an ally and you accept them too. From my perspective, I'm the attraction lead for the Hispanic community, and when we do events, we usually see everybody's just Hispanic, because they ally as part of our group, and it's hard to bring people in. But I think they're making the effort to make sure that it's in the name allies. So we have allies for all abilities, that's one. And then allies for equality, that's another one. So that they are advertising it as this is allies are welcome. And I think that was what I brought again. That's how I joined today. Otherwise, I would have seen women of the group are going to meet tonight, but not allowed to be there.
That is
You are always welcome, Eric.
Sam, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so just a really quick point off of what Eric, because I thought that was really interesting about the ERGs having ally in the name, but sort of similar with my company. We've got basically ERGs for any group you could think of. Personally for me, and then I'm involved in our We STEM group because I'm in engineering. So women in STEM, working on from grade school all the way up to the females that work at our company and different events and things like that. But I know at least for us, while maybe the name ally is not in the title of the ERG, I know whether it's the veteran groups or different minority groups, the We STEM, I know that they always, for people that are new to the company or just at different events, they're always trying to encourage people, and I think everyone has the same message. This is open for anyone that's interested to learn more and to become an ally as well. And it seems to work pretty well with getting people involved because like the one I'm really involved with We STEM, there's a great diverse group from across the company, different functions, but then just people from different backgrounds that participate in it. So it seems to work out pretty well for my company.
Do you think it's because they heavily push the allyship side, or do you think it's because it's just part of the culture of your firm that everyone is so just like focused on like, we need to be allies, period? Like this is just ingrained in the culture. Because I'm also trying to figure out, right, in my company, we do have all these BRGs, but like Eric was mentioning, I go to events, the Hispanic event or like the African American events or like even the Asian American events, which I am very much guilty of. And it's everyone in the room is of that diversity group, which is wonderful. But then I don't see their allies showing up for them. So I think that's very interesting. So I want to kind of get your take, Ryan, on what you think your company's doing so well to get allies to the table and to the room.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And I've been in my company for about 5 years, and the industry that my company is in is healthcare, and specifically I'm in our med tech area of the company. So even just as our industry, and I used to be in previous roles or like when I did co-ops and internships, aviation and others that were definitely more and engineering. If anyone else is on the line, mechanical specifically for me, very male heavily dominated, but and that's one of the things I've loved about my company is it's a very great mix, both men and female, but then diverse backgrounds as well. But yeah, Sam, to answer your question, I think from my perspective, only being here for a little bit, it does seem to probably be ingrained in the culture. I think these ERGs have been around for a while, and since I've been there, and it seems to be really pushed by leadership as well. So when we see that people really high up in the company are hosting different events with some of these different ERG groups within the company, it seems that's maybe one example of why I could see it could be, and it has been ingrained in the company. It seems to even been improving since I've been at the company too.
Ryan's point, I think you mentioned like kind of executive support of the groups, and the main ERGs, at least at my company, all have executive sponsors. They're not all people who are part of said community. Like for instance, the executive sponsor for Women At, I believe for the longest time was our male CRO. No, maybe he was white and male, and actually I think he was the executive sponsor of Black At. Because we don't have that many Black execs, unfortunately. But regardless, when you see execs posting, it also adds like additional visibility. And if they are not of the community that they're representing, I think it also like sends a message that that allies are welcome. So I think getting leaders, if not executives at your company involved, could be a good step. Sam.
It sounds like to me like it's the invite. You don't feel like you're invited to go to the party, like, because I was like, I've never showed up to a BRG group thing that I wasn't invited to, or I wasn't part of, unless it said an allies on it. Like you'd see it in the elevator or whatever, and it was like, this is a conversation event, but I would never just show up to their meeting because I wasn't a part of it. Maybe that's the wrong viewpoint though.
No, I
No,
think
I don't
I
think
think
there's
probably a
anything
lot
wrong.
of people are similar. Like I'm similar in some respect that it's like I think it's I remember what Eric said about like, you know, if you didn't see like a men as allies component for like an event posted that said like a women in business event, you know, as a man, would you go? Like even if you are an ally or trying to be an ally, it's almost like maybe my instinct to be an ally is to like shut up in that situation and like not sort of feel like I'm barging into the women's group like I'm here, you know. So I think there's a really interesting point to what you brought up there, Christine, for sure.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think showing up to events and sometimes thinking, am I going to be the only one that's different there can be a little bit intimidating. But I think recognizing that those BRGs and those people that join those BRGs feel like that a lot of the time. And this is their community. And you showing up for their community is also very important. And I think getting over that initial, am I going to stand out? Like, what am I doing here? What's my purpose in joining this? I think that's difficult. And to get over that hump of, you know, that mental block can be challenging for a lot of people, not just you, Christine. And definitely, like, I've experienced it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective, Samantha. Do you feel like other than, you know, top-down support and some executive support, what are other ways that organizations can encourage allyship, you know, something that might be more like grassroots or ground up?
We had discussed this a little bit at one point within WIB of like, you know, is it just like the, you know, I'm an ally on your signature, right? On your email signature, or is it, you know, a sign you put up in your cubicle or, you know, in your office, or how, and this is to me, like, I'm seeking this knowledge is like, how do people know that I'm raising my hand to say, hey, like, I stand behind you. But like, if I'm not directly witnessing or in the room when something's happening, to be an ally in the moment, how are we, I don't know how to show up other than to, you know, continue to interact with a diverse employee population. You know, I guess I consider myself an ally, but I don't like introduce myself as like, hi, I'm Michelle, I'm an ally. Like that, to me, that would be even weirder. So I'm actually really curious because I'd like to be able to show up stronger.
Yeah, interesting. And I think also, you know, sort of in the arc of a career, like, you know, if you're not super high up the chain, there's almost not enough people who are like coming up behind you to practice the sort of, you know, like lift people up and, you know, extend allyship. So I think as, you know, if you're not as high up in the ranks at a company, it can be difficult to sort of practice allyship meaningfully other than really, you know, identifying and saying that, you know, you are an ally. And so I think that's a really good point, Michelle.
If I see myself in that position, I think what I have done in the past, rather than saying, okay, I am an ally, I said that, okay, I belong to that group. And then I talk about this group is really active in doing so and so, this and this, so that people get an idea. Okay, I promote that and I am an active supporter. So that was my way of saying people.
Eric, if you're I can't hear him.
Oh, because I didn't start talking yet. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the issues that you have is that when you talk about allyship and being allies, some people don't want to be felt different. So it's kind of hard for them to kind of accept that they might like, you know, want an ally or something like that and be part of that community. And I've seen this within my own company. Like I've seen some people say these sorts of things, and like some of the things that he said was similar to some of the things that Michelle said in kind of her talk about her company. So like I think like that's the thing though, is that sometimes the best way to go about it is be discreet about it and just try to make sure that they know that you're there for them if they ever need anything.
I think sometimes it also comes down to like brand building, and, you know, and actions do speak louder than words. And it's like that consistent action. It's like, how do you prove that you're reliable other than just being reliable, right? Like, how do you prove that you're an ally other than just being an ally? And I think eventually people just identify you through your actions. But yeah, it's definitely tough, especially when you're meeting a person for the first time and you may be going through some situation at that very moment together, and you don't have it stamped on your head like, I'm an ally, like you can rely on me, like I've got your back in this situation. It's like, and again, Adi, like you were saying, like they may not be comfortable with you maybe speaking up in that instance, because, you know, like the video was saying, like there's a fine line between allyship, performative allyship, having a savior complex. So how do you walk that line, especially with people that you meet for the first time? But I do think actions over time, very consistent actions, do label you in a way that people in your community know that you're an ally. It just takes time.
Yeah, I think
that was my question too, like, because I made a conscious decision that I was going to be an ally just because I know my daughter is coming in now, like she's about to enter the workforce and things like that. So I need to be an ally. So for myself, okay, I identify like that. But what do you do? Like what? It's like, okay, I'm here now. How do I show up? I show up, then that I'm an ally. But what do I do? Like, what's the actions that you have to do? And that's the big question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like the video said, you know, the consistency of allyship is key, and you can't demonstrate consistency in one moment, you know, so it is something that goes over time. And I think it's the value of, I can't remember, it was, I think Michelle or Samantha who said like personal relationships, you know, just cultivating good relationships with the people around you and making them know that your intentions are good and that you are an ally and that you're there as a resource to help. And yeah, you can say that once, but like people might believe you, that might not believe you. The best way for them to really believe you and to demonstrate that is to be consistent with it over time.
Jesse, do you want to say something?
Well, I was going to ask, like, if anyone in the group who identifies as like underrepresented, either women or like by race or origin, like if anyone has ever felt like somebody else who was trying to be an ally did step over the line, or was like performative, or kind of like doing something you were not welcoming. This is not a good example because this is like not real allyship, but for instance, like as a woman, I hate when men like make a big show of like opening the door for me. Again, not allyship. That's like a societal thing, but I think there's like a relationship there, right? Of like, it actually annoys me if somebody's doing something that I think is performative, or like, yeah, I don't know, highly annoyed.
I think sometimes it's the jumping the gun for allies, where they see something's happening and they immediately need to insert themselves. When sometimes, like, people who are being discriminated against or experiencing these actions towards them would have wanted to handle that a completely different way, right? Like, I think I personally like to have more like one-on-one conversations, like not very publicly, because I don't want that person to also feel like shamed in any way, because I'm a firm believer that like life is all about learning, and like I want you to have the opportunity to learn with me and not just like reprimand you in front of everyone. And sometimes like allies, they just like want to get it over with in a way, right? And it's like, it's not about the getting over it and like putting them back in their place. It is really about educating, which sometimes can be very difficult for allies to realize like, maybe this is an educational experience for everyone and not just like a immediate reaction. Not to say that there are instances where immediate actions are needed, but I definitely think sometimes allies definitely jump the gun.
And also too, if I may add on that, the only thing I was going to add to, I think a lot of what we perceive as allyship is based off of how we were raised and where we were raised. A prime example of that, I mean, as y'all can tell, I have an accent. So I'm from the country, I'm a rural kid, a country kid, if you will. And so just based off of being in that type of lifestyle, the way that I look at how to treat a woman, for an example, like Jess, you would hate me because I would be the one to open up the door for you. It's just, and in my mind, and I know the more I age, the more I get out of that box of my hometown and the area it's from, the more I learn about myself, the more I expose myself to new experiences and just train myself. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that for me, what I can do is just ask. And that is one thing, especially since being in school, again, that is the one thing that's been like a door shut in my face. It's really hit me hard that I am constantly having to adapt and learn, and certain words and certain expressions, certain ways I would act and behave and whatnot. I know it depends on who you are to know how that those may be perceived. And so once again, I can only speak for myself, but it's just one of those things that just takes time, as we all have said on this call. It just takes time to learn and just to ask if you have any qualms or issues.
I'll let you open the door for me. I don't hate you. Just open the door for your fellow men too.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I support, like don't discriminate. It's a gesture, and it can be applied to both men and women, so we don't have to discriminate. So yeah. And there has been a lot of times in the grocery store or wherever, I like hold the door and let the man like pass. Maybe an old elderly, not necessarily an old elderly, I let him pass, and then so I don't even judge that, okay, I'm letting the woman pass or men pass, it's just a gesture, being nice. That's it.
I will add on to, my time in the US has primarily been in the South, and I will add on that I was raised with a lot of those Southern gestures. And one of the things that drives me nuts, and I will call out, is when, you go into a meeting room and there's not enough chairs, and they say, hey, can we get some men to bring in chairs in the room? And I will walk out and go get chairs, and I'll be like, don't worry, my muscles work just as good as yours. Like, and I do, it depends on the crowd or whatnot, but I will make a comment, because there is that like reverse, just like if you ask me to get the coffee and donuts, like you better be asking the guy next to me next week. But it's those little things that, the Southern things we all have cultural expectations that we can be trained in and out of.
Speaking, Michelle, of like the coffee example, something within groups at KG that I have noticed, Kelley, is that oftentimes there is like a leaning towards the woman in the group, because we are in the Kelley community, like the minority, which actually surprised me, to like be a note taker or like the transcriber. And I have trouble sometimes discerning if I actually like gravitate towards that, because that is kind of my nature to like be a note taker. But sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, I'm not going to offer because I know that it's like expected in this group. And so just like a way even to like be an ally in, you know, a community like that, it's, you know, if there is one woman in a breakout group or like in an assignment team, and somebody kind of like says like, hey, Sam, you want to grab the notes? Like to be like, no, I'll do it. Or no, Bill, you do it.
I will agree, Jesse. The awkward 10 seconds at the beginning of every Zoom breakout room where they're like, so who's going to start the doc? And I'm like, the amount of time it took you to ask that question, you could have started a doc. You know, and it's just funny because like, I'm like, I will start the doc, you know, and then there will be times where I will just let them decide among themselves.
So again, I am the bold and pushy personality. I noticed that frequently. And I actually started asking, I would pick out someone in the group and be like, Erin, you want to take notes this time? So
I'm going to take that one from you. I like that.
Yeah, and I think those type of things, when you do them well, no one really begrudges you for them. You know, it's almost like you have to like interrupt that routine where it falls into like a normal pattern of bias, you know, and like just be proactive. Be like, do you want to take notes? And most people are like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I know we have a couple minutes left. So just to leave you with one last question, how do you hold yourself and others accountable in terms of allyship going forward after this discussion?
So far, that's great. However, what happens on the Zooms is like, yes, it happens all the time. Like, I didn't realize that until you were saying about that. So I will pay attention to that.
I think like,
oh,
sorry,
go ahead, Jesse. No, Jesse, you got this.
I was just like, you know, I think I took away from this also just like the not needing to wait for an invitation, also like not inserting myself where I'm not wanted. But like, again, we do have a lot of ERGs, and like, I don't think like aside from the Pride group that I actively participate in, like, I don't think I've actively ever gone to like a community event for any of the other ERGs. And so I could do that.
And that's similar to what, oh, sorry, Christine, go for it.
I think it's when something happens, it's like having that like pulling someone aside and having that conversation, like, you know, not in front of everyone, but because maybe they don't see what they're doing, and then in the future they can grow from that. And then because I would want someone to tell me if I offended them.
For me, I think it was similar to Jesse, of the point that, you know, Samantha raised earlier about, you know, being active and present in some of those discussions, whether or not allies are sort of specifically requested or called out as a part of it. So I think appreciate you bringing that up, and that'll definitely sort of change how I think about it going forward.
I know we just have a couple of minutes left, but before we adjourn, do we want to take a group picture and post that?
Let's do it.
Okay. Sam, are you doing, or I can?
Yeah, I'll take a little screenshot of my Zoom. Sure. I love this. All right, everyone, pearly whites. Let's look. Let's see them. And to answer the question for my own self, I think it's about the invitation. Some people don't know that they're invited, and even though I've become more comfortable in my own self, being in the room and educating myself, if I don't see allies in the room, I think it's my responsibility as an ally to invite others to come and be better allies and be good allies and learn about allyship. I think that's something that I've taken away, where it's like, oh, like maybe people aren't as comfortable as I think about allyship and where to even begin. Michelle,
Maybe the women will come crash a future Men as Allies event.
Let's do
Please
it.
do. Please do. You're always welcome.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is, Eric, we really need to add allies into our women in business. So women in business plus allies, because I'm so happy that y'all are here, and I don't want anybody to feel like they're not welcome. And the other piece of that is I actually have had it on my to-do list and just haven't taken that effort to reach out to other minority groups. And I mean, I'm in a mixed race couple. I have a mixed child, and like, I'm not even standing up for him at this point. And that's really important to me, to make sure that he is equally represented.
All right. Well, I think we're just coming up on time, but I truly do appreciate all of you coming, sharing your stories, being open with us. Jesse, I see your heart. I heart you too. I'm so glad that we could have kicked the year off with such an amazing event. I hope all of you took something away. And now our community is getting even bigger now that we know each other. So don't forget, add each other on LinkedIn. Keep promoting all of the events that are coming up. Men as Allies, let us know if you have events. We'll happily promote them for you as well. But until next time, it was so great talking to all of you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate all the
Thanks for
support and
hosting, y'all.
participation.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Same
Thanks.
here. Thank
you.
you.